The first time Guts and Zodd encounter one another in the manga is something out of a horror movie. We know Guts to be strong, but at this point in his life he had never seen something like an apostle or anything close to Zodd's strength. Walking through the corridors of the compound and seeing his fellow soldiers not just dead, but absolutely massacred like a goddamn cannon went off in here, it was the stuff of nightmares. And yet, even still, Guts continued forward and did not retreat. He saw this gigantic and, naked man standing there holding multiple corpses of the Hawk soldiers, and it was here that Guts and Zodd first laid eyes on one another. Guts and Zodd have fought each other a handful of times in the manga, but unlike these Zodd vs Skull Knight encounters that seem to always end in a draw, every single fight between Guts and Zodd is different and it progresses their dynamic in a different way. And if we look at the evolution of their fights from the first to their most recent, I feel like there is a connected through line that might give us an idea as to where their relationship will ultimately end up. Both Zodd and Guts are extremely powerful warriors that have based their life on combat and the sword. In fact, if you look at Guts' character, and especially in the early stages of the Golden Age arc when they first met, but also even in the Black Swordsman arc that was shown in the story before this, Zodd is a definitive parallel to Guts, or perhaps even a cautionary tale. Zodd is what has become of a man who has spent his entire life basing everything on battle, strength, and prowess, or even simpler than that, just survival. The same way that Guts had to constantly fight for his life and was never close to anyone, a lone wanderer just surviving day to day. No long-term goals or dreams to accomplish, his only mission was to stay alive, and to be fair, it was that mindset that allowed him to push as far as he had in life. But Guts does manage to develop beyond this over time. He grows an attachment to the Band of the Hawk, to the people that he can rely on and trust and whom look up to him as their unit commander. And of course, later on, Guts would grow a strong loyalty and love to Casca and vice versa. Guts finds humanity in being able to experience things that are worth living for, other than just fighting to live. But what if he hadn't? If Guts had stayed in only an isolated, rage-like state, he would perhaps not be that different than Zodd himself, other than one is human and one is not. Many characters in Berserk go down extremely dark paths, submitting to their darkest and most evil tendencies, and throwing away what matters to them most. Zodd serves as a look as to what Guts would be like if he were to find himself with a Beylit and make that sacrifice. We don't know exactly what it was that Zodd sacrificed, but I would imagine it was something similar to Guts, a close-knit group of comrades, a friend, or maybe even a lover. Trading it all in for absolute strength and to be on the battlefield forever, never having to think beyond the current moment of swinging your sword. The first encounter with Zodd, in a way, is Guts looking at a potential future. It's the mad dog coming face to face with itself. What is this monstrosity? It's a reflection of a possible fate. But there's much more to it than that as well. The very first time Guts and Zodd fight, Zodd is way more powerful than Guts is. And yet it is Guts' indomitable will to keep fighting that allows him to actually land a blow on Zodd, to be the first human in years to be able to wound him. And thus Zodd honors him with his transformation, showcasing what he truly is and sending fear all through Guts' body. Zodd's apostle form is just a powerhouse, showcasing what he stands for: absolute strength. A classic Minotaur-like design, gigantic, muscle-bound, and also looking a little bit like a kitty cat. Meow. Though this isn't confirmed, I've always viewed that the apostle forms are the representation of that specific person's inner darkness. Zodd's Beast of Darkness that would have been inside him as a human manifested in this look. Similarly, if Guts had made an apostle transformation, I would imagine that he would look very similar to his inner Beast of Darkness, that mad dog. But of course, their first battle ends with Griffith showing up with reinforcements, and with their combined efforts, both Guts and Griffith are able to get some slices out of good old Zoddy Boy, and this is where the plot thickens. There are two humans here that can harm him. Curious to where this could lead, and then seeing the crimson Beylit around Griffith's neck, Zodd departs, willing to allow causality to do its thing, and wait for his future encounters with both of them. By the next time that Guts and Zodd meet one another, a lot in the story has changed, and I mean when they are actually face to face and both conscious and ready to battle. Zodd, value in strength absolute, vows his loyalty to Griffith after Griffith ascends to the God Hand and rips off one of Zodd's perfectly symmetrical horns that I miss to this day. So when Zodd and Guts have their second battle on the Hill of Swords, the dynamics have drastically shifted. Now Guts is no longer under Griffith's command, but Zodd is. They switch positions as his right-hand man, but also Guts has much more experience and has, despite losing an eye and an arm, become much stronger. Now Guts is going toe-to-toe with Zodd in his human form, keeping up with his speed and his force. Now when Zodd transforms, it is not as a tribute, but because he needs to transform in order to truly enjoy this fight. Guts has advanced to be able to face Zodd at that transformed state, showcasing Guts' evolution as a character, but also the fine line to how close he is becoming like Zodd, but without that sacrifice, without giving up his humanity, and without denying his attachments to those he cares about, like Casca. And it's definitely true that Zodd still had the upper hand in this fight, and probably would have won if Griffith didn't call him off to leave, but it was still a night and day difference from their first battle. Now, this next encounter was not actually a fight, but a team-up, and this is very important for the progression of the Guts and Zodd scenes in the story. Guts finds himself up against Ganishka, whose apostle form is a giant mass of smoke and mist which is impossible to physically damage. As Zodd shows up with Griffith's army, even he can't do anything against Ganishka alone. But there is a way, if they work together. And here's where it gets interesting. You see how the first time Guts works for Griffith, Zodd is stronger than them both. Second time, Zodd works for Griffith, Guts is almost even with him. And now this time, it's fair to say that Guts and Zodd are even, and it's them together. Not against Griffith, no, but up against an almost equally terrifying force. Guts and Zodd use their combined efforts to slice through Ganishka and use Guts' Dragon Slayer, which now has the ability to harm on an astral and physical level, and they actually are able to do significant damage to Ganishka. And after this moment, Zodd respects Guts enough to not try to attack him, but to actually allow him to leave. So what I'm getting at is this shifting sides and the shifting of the power dynamics. First, it was Zodd against the two, then Zodd against one, then Zodd with Guts as equals. Soon, Guts is going to surpass Zodd. And what did Zodd do when Griffith showed up and showed his power over him? And I'm not saying that Zodd will just abandon Griffith only because Guts is strong. After all, Griffith will still be stronger than Guts by a mile in comparison. But what I am saying is that the transition and progression of their duels is leading me to think that this was only the first of their team efforts. Zodd has a lot more in common with Guts, and if there was a good enough reason, Zodd has enough agency within himself to decide to align with whoever he wants to. We've seen apostles defy the God Hand before, and all we need is that little reason. And whatever that reason is, it will be exemplified by the fact that Guts will finally be able to defeat Zodd. And the most recent time, as of making of this video, is when we saw Guts and Zodd fight at Zodd's arrival on Elfhelm. And though this battle doesn't progress much of what I was talking about, we should also take note that this is motherfucking Zodd we are talking about, and Guts evades a few attacks of him very easily, and then zips right past him in order to attack Griffith. In other words, Guts wasn't even viewing Zodd as a priority. He just got around him and without the use of the Berserker armor. So it's definitely not a victory, but I do think it can still be used as a clue to their eventual fate together. Guts will defeat him, and Zodd will team up with Guts once more. And symbolism-wise, I think it will be reminiscent of Guts defeating him while holding on to his humanity, while still having love and loyalty to his group, without making sacrifices, and he will rise to Zodd's level without ever having to become what Zodd is. By the end of the series, Guts might have Zodd sweating bullets in fear, very similar to how they first met, but the situation reversed. Possibly, but only time will tell. So you guys let me know what you think about the symbolism and progression of the Guts vs Zodd confrontations in the manga. Do you think it means that it is leading towards something like I do? Or is this just another wild tinfoil hat theory? Let me know in the comments below, and also don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't so far, because once I hit 100,000 subscribers, well, if I do by the end of the year, you are all invited to my pizza party, and I promise it's going to be a great sacrifice. I mean, it's going to be a great event that you won't ever forget.